Okay, so we're gonna back up. We're not even gonna do ecology yet. We're just gonna talk about biology. Sweet, and then earbud out, please, and then notes. Okay, so like it or not, science classes, and specifically this one, have lots and lots of terminology. If we can get down the terminology and learn the definition of all these things, that'll get you actually like halfway through most of these tests. So we need to get comfortable with like figuring out new words. I think you guys will actually be a little bit better at it than, as you get older, you just pick up all these things. I think you'll kind of surprise yourselves how good you are at that. So biology has two parts. It has bio and ology. You probably know what they mean. What does bio mean? Life. What is ology? Study of, yeah. So it's the study of life, biology, just like geology is the study of the earth, yeah. So biology. If there's ever a weird word that you're just not sure what it means, break it up into its constituent parts. If you're still stuck, ask your friends, ask me, that sort of thing. Think of other words that might be similar. And that should help you out. Everyone else have that one? Okay, one of our themes in biology is we're going to look at the levels of organization. So for example, we might look at the organism level. But organisms are made up of parts. What's the next level down from the organism? Just borrow a sheet of paper. Borrow a pencil. Take some notes. What's the next level down from organism? Any ideas? What are organisms made of? Yes, cells. We skipped some steps in between though. A group of cells put together. Does anyone know? What's in between cells and organism? Tissue. Yeah, a group of cells is a tissue. My human anatomy kids learn all about tissues, epithelial tissue, stuff like that. What's a group of tissues? I know you guys know this. You just don't know you know it.
Skin.
Yeah, skin is an example of
Tissue. The body.
Somebody said it over here, I think.
Organ.
Organ, yeah, there we go. Organ. And then there's one more in between organs and organism. A group of organs. Yeah, system. So for example, your like esophagus, your stomach, your intestines are all part of your blank system. Digestive system. Good job. But system. We got there. Okay. So cells, tissue, organ, system, organism itself, right? In fact, we can go smaller than cells. We talked about this too. Cells have little parts. What are the parts called? Starts with an O.
Organelles.
Yeah, organelles. Organelles like the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell nucleus, which we all saw in both the human and the plant cells. It's going to get a little trickier. Organelles are made of? Do two more. Squeeze them in. Make a wild guess. We're really zooming down here. Too small to see with a light microscope.
Atoms.
Yeah, atoms. And an atom of carbon and oxygen and hydrogen all crammed together make? What's that called? We put a bunch of atoms together. Molecules, there we go. Sweet. So we could obviously keep going if this was like physics or chemistry. We could go into like subatomic particles. But for our purposes, we'll probably stay just in the like atom molecule range. Actually, we'll talk about atoms all the way up. And in fact, we're going to go past organism. If let's say I have an organism like, I don't know, ravens or something like that, and I was to look at all of the ravens in the Fairbanks area, what would I call that group? What? Close. It's not like a specific name for any particular like species, right? But if you had like a group of one organism, what about humans? What do you call like the humans of the Fairbanks area? Yeah, population. I heard it. Population. So we use population to determine like, oh, the number of humans in a city or the state or whatever. It's the same way in ecology, but we're talking specifically about any group, any organism, right? So you could also talk about the population of moose in Alaska or the population of moose in Fairbanks or something like that. Two more, well, 2 or 3 more. Next up is where we have a group of different populations or a group of different species, each with their own population. Any idea what that is called? They're all living together in the same area, so therefore they're a community, yes. Community. And then finally we get into things like ecosystem, biome, and I'm going to just go put biosphere here. It's kind of our capstone. Let's talk about the biosphere real quick. So it's called the biosphere because it's part of Earth that can support life. Most of Earth actually can't, right? Earth has like a solid iron core, and it has like this molten magma stuff. 99.999% of Earth is just like incredibly hot. It just burns everything alive, if it ever found its way down there. As far as we know, there's no life in the center of the Earth, not even dinosaurs. So where we do have life, though, is in the solid rock. As long as the rock is solid, we found like bacteria in the water and in the cracks in rock and stuff like that. We find life on the surface, obviously, and in the oceans. And we also find bacteria floating around in the atmosphere all the way up toward the edge of space. We have never found life outside of Earth. We've never found life on the moon or Mars or anything like that. Incidentally, speaking of the moon, what's happening tomorrow? Oh my goodness, you guys. The Artemis rocket is launching. This is like the biggest rocket literally ever, and the plan is to launch it tomorrow morning. It's going to take the United States to the moon at some point in the future. That's the plan. Anyway, you should tune in, watch that rocket launch. Pretty cool. So the biosphere is this small region here on this one planet that, as far as we know, all life exists. So that's our biosphere. Let's back up even further, talk about life. We got to define it. There we go. So we don't have a great definition of life. I have a definition of life, but we're gonna skip it. What we'd rather do is just list some attributes of life. So what are some things about living organisms that aren't true of non-living things? What do living things do? Well, that's just... No, that's a good point. And well, I'm not going to list it, but I'll circle back to that. Reproduce, I think is the word you were going for. reproduction, yeah. Living things can reproduce. Keep going, what else? Evolve, I like that one, good one. Living things can evolve. Not only do they reproduce, right? You make the little tiny baby one, and then the baby does what? Before it dies, it grows. Yeah, living things can grow. When something dies, like if your body dies and you get eaten by worms and you lie in there and you eventually, like, your bones dissolve into dust, blah, blah, blah. You start off nice and neat and orderly before you go into this like chaotic state of death, right? So I'm also going to put organized. What else do living things do? What do you do all the time? What is that? Eat. Do you have to eat to be living? Are there organisms that don't eat? Yes, but they do. What's the purpose of eating? What does it give you? Energy, yeah. Living things use energy. I'm going to call that metabolism. Or essentially utilizing energy, right? One way, shape, or form, whether it be from the sun or whether it's, other organisms, something like that. They also can interact with their environment, right? Sorry, I scribbled that a bit. Interact with environment is what it says. So it's kind of useful to list these properties of living things, because then it helps us determine, okay, what is a living thing, right? Give me an example of an organism. A what? A dog, yeah. Dogs are mammals just like us. We're organisms, we know that. Give me something that's weird that's not like humans, that's also an organism. A plant, yeah, plants are organisms. They can't move, right? Do you have to be able to move to be an organism? No. But do plants grow? Do they reproduce? Do they evolve? Yeah, they include all these things. What about this? Is this alive?
Yeah.
This is life. This is living. No. Well, is it growing?
Yes.
Can I reproduce it?
Yes.
Ooh, maybe. Okay, I'm just gonna burn my finger. Does it have a metabolism?
No.
It doesn't utilize energy?
Yes.
It does. Yeah, oh, so how does it fail then?
It runs out. Because it doesn't get
We run
oxygen.
out too. Because what?
It doesn't get oxygen, so it dies. That way.
You die when you don't get oxygen?
No, that's why you have to have it for free. That's why dark sky usually is when it doesn't have the
That's true. That's true of people too, but people are alive.
Yeah.
So how does this fail the test for life?
One. No.
Well, does fire evolve? Not really. Not when it goes to, the fire that I just lit on this match is the exact same as any other fire that's ever existed, right? So fire isn't evolving. Definitely interacts with its environment, but yeah, it can grow. It fails on like the evolve thing. Is it organized? No, it is literally chaos. Fire, it goes from a state of order to a state of disorder, right? So it is not organized at all. So it fails on some of these marks. What about single-celled organisms? Do those count as life? If it's just a single cell? Like a bacteria. Can bacteria reproduce? Yeah, maybe not sexually, but they can reproduce, right? Do they grow? Are they organized? Do they interact? Do they have metabolism? Yeah, so are bacteria alive? Yeah, cool. What about viruses? So viruses are kind of on the border. They're right there on whether, the question is still a little bit open as to whether or not they're alive. Biologists are kind of arguing with other biologists about this. If you were to open your textbook I guarantee will say, nope, they're not alive because they're not cells. We're going to draw the line at cells. If you talk to, I would argue that now more than half of biologists would say that viruses are alive. Are they organized? Yes. The one part that you could argue that they don't count is they cannot reproduce on their own and they don't have their own metabolism, right? But you cannot argue that viruses don't evolve. We know that they evolve, right? They're definitely organized, interact with their environment, they can grow or at least be assembled. They're incredibly simple little things. So a lot of folks will say that they're not alive, but we also just in common terminology can say like, oh, can we kill a virus? Yeah, you can have a dead virus, right? Or like you can kill a COVID virus. So if you can kill it, it must mean it's alive. Like
But you can't like permanently kill it, really.
Yeah, you can.
Like make vaccines and stuff to like prevent it, but there's still.
No, but you can kill an individual viron,
Oh, yeah.
right? You can kill that individual one, so it is no longer infectious for people. Yeah. So my point being that they're kind of at this borderline. If you ask somebody older or ask your textbook or something like that, 90% of the internet will probably say like, no, they're not alive. But the opinion is changing among biologists. Is kind of my point. What about like super advanced AI? Yeah, not right now, but what about like 100 years in the future, 200 years in the future? Like sci-fi style AI, should they be considered, living?
Yeah.
I mean, you can make good arguments that if they can meet these criteria, they should be considered living, right? If they can grow, evolve, interact. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking of like Star Trek, like Data in Star Trek, right? I mean, he's an android, right? Is he considered life? Like, I would argue if he meets all these requirements, it counts, even if that like evolution isn't, DNA type things. Okay. Anyway, it's just a question for your like grandkids. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, let's zoom in on ecology. Ecology. Ecology has two parts. We have biotic factors and then abiotic. So biotic means, life, living. Abiotic here, the only difference is there's an A in front, right? So what does the A mean? It means without, exactly. So another example would be like, have you heard the word moral versus amoral, right? Amoral means like a person without morals. So abiotic is without life. So living factors versus non-living factors. What are some examples of like biotic factors? Give me a couple. So humans, sure. What's another biotic factor? Yeah, what sort of plants are around? Maybe what sort of like diseases or bacteria? What are some abiotic factors that you might find like common out in the environment that aren't living?
Rocks.
Okay, sure. There's rocks. I would argue the type of rock that you live on is rarely influential as to like what type of organisms and what the environment is like. There are some other things that influence a lot more than what type of rock you're on. Like we live in Alaska. What's some of our big abiotic factors around here?
Mountains. Snow.
Yeah, why, I mean, what's true about Alaska? It's very cold. Yeah, temperature. Mountains definitely count. Snow definitely counts, right? But give me one more abiotic factor you can think of that's variable that you can go out and measure as a scientist. Again, what's different about Alaska versus Arizona or Hawaii or whatever? Yeah, we got temperature, and we don't care about people. That's biotic. Something about coasts. What was that? Yeah, water is a good one. Yeah, so rainfall, humidity. Water has a zillion variables with it, right? You can talk about the humidity, the water in the air. You can talk about the salinity of the water, right? If you have water, how much salt is in it? You can talk about dissolved oxygen, minerals, temperature of the water. If it's a stream, you can talk about how deep and wide and fast and that sort of thing about the water. So water has all these variables that are abiotic. Cool. Okay, now we're going to talk about how they interact. So, do some interaction here. Okay, put on your drawing hat. We're going to have to draw some animals, some organisms at least. Sorry, it says interaction. What are some ways some organisms interact? Yeah, they communicate. And communication for various ways and reasons, like for their social interaction. All of these other ones involve some sort of communication usually. What are some other ways they interact? They do what? How did they interact with each other? So think of two different species of animal, right? Or an animal and a plant or something like that. How do they interact with each other? Cow eating grass. We're going to call it predation. I gotta draw a cow. Oh, it looks like a horse. Oh no. Oh well, whatever. Look at its spots. Yeah. 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 There, now it's a cow. I don't know why his neck's all skinny. And now it's just getting worse. All right, whatever. Draw a better cow. Deal. You don't make fun of my drawings, and I don't grade you on yours. Deal? Or how about this? If you can draw me a better one and then come up here and show it, then you can make fun of mine. Usually people who are good at drawing don't make fun of people for being bad drawers. All right, so we'll put this as predation because it's one organism eating another, right? And that's under the broad sense of predation, right? You wouldn't necessarily call this prey, but it is being consumed alive by this other organism. Any other ways that organisms interact with each other? Besides just eating each other? Well, yeah, killing and eating each other, yep. What are some other ways organisms interact? Ooh, pollination. Yeah, let's do it. That falls under symbiotic relationship. Put it down here. You know what bugs me is I'm plugged in. I'm about to lose battery power on this thing. Don't know how that works. Symbiotic relationship. Oh my There we go. So there's 3 types of symbiotic relationships. The one we're talking about with pollination is the win-win. It's called mutualism. And in this situation, we have like a flower thing. And it's got its little pollen. And then you have either a bird or a bee come along. That's why I call it the birds and the bees talk. And it goes, oh, look at that. I want some of that sweet, sweet nectar. And it rubs up on the pollen while it's getting the nectar. Does the bee benefit? Yeah, what's it get? Well, it gets pollen, but usually it's actually after the nectar. So it gets the nectar. The pollen's kind of just a byproduct. What does the flower get? It gets what? Oh, come on. We haven't had the birds and the bees talk.
Well, I don't know why it's birds and the bees when it's bees and flowers. Why is it birds and bees?
What are the bees doing for the flower? What does the flower get out of it? It gets pollen from other flowers, right? This is how plants have sex. They are, no, it's literally called sexual reproduction, right? Because they're getting pollen from other flowers to come over. So the benefit for the happy flower is he gets to reproduce, right? And this little guy gets a snack. Who's getting the better deal? Yeah, the bird or the bee gets the snack. The flowers get to reproduce. Yep. So that's called mutualism. They both benefit, the win-win. There's 2 other types of symbiotic relationships. There's win-lose, and then there's win-blank. What's the win-lose one called? Don't have to actually kill it. That's predation usually. But what's one where you don't want to kill the thing that you're eating? What's where you actually like say like eat an organism, but you don't want to kill it because it's also your home.
Wait, say that again?
What happens when you don't want to? You're eating an organism, but you don't want to kill it because it's also your home, where you're living inside that other organism.
Like a beetle living in a tree, eating the tree?
Yeah, that's a pretty good example. What's another one? Yeah, so this falls under parasitism. Or parasite. Tapeworm, yeah. That's what I always think of, is like tapeworms and stuff. So here's like the stomach, and the tapeworm's hanging out inside. It like is wound in there, eating your food. Yeah, so parasites, does the tapeworm want to kill you? No. Is it good to have a tapeworm in your stomach? No. You're on the losing end, tapeworm's on the winning end, but the tapeworm doesn't, this isn't predation, it's not eating you alive, it's just eating your food, it might suck your blood or drain your resources, that sort of thing. And then finally, the win, don't lose. I'll be impressed if anyone knows this term. Anyone? It's called commensalism. And this is where one organism benefits and one doesn't really care. The classic example here is like, if I can draw this guy. Like a whale. You know how they have like little barnacles growing on them? Do the barnacles hurt the whale? No, they're not eating the whale. They're just attached to them, right? The whale, as far as we can tell, does just fine with the barnacles attached. It doesn't seem to get harmed. But do the barnacles benefit? Yeah, they get a free ride. They get to travel around, right? They get to colonize new areas. They get to get a constant supply of fresh food to filter feed. They probably get scraps of his food as well. So barnacles get a benefit. Whale could take it or leave it, doesn't care. All right, there's one more major way they interact, and that is competition. Competition is super important among organisms that don't eat each other. For example, plants. Do plants compete? For what? Nutrients. What else do they compete for? Water. What else do they compete for? Sunlight. Yeah. This is why a lot of plants either grow fast or they grow tall. So like, they will literally attempt to like outshade the ground so they don't get any more competition from any other little like upstart plants. So plants compete for resources, whether it be nutrients or whatever. But do other like animals compete as well? Can animals compete for the same resources? Yeah, exactly. If they're the same species, they might compete for mates. If they're different species, they can compete for food, habitat, space, whatever it is. Even though they might not directly kill each other, like I don't know, here in Alaska we have like bears and wolves, right? If there's like if the wolf pack takes down a caribou and there's a carcass, but then a big brown bear comes along, he might chase off the wolves, and they can compete for that that dead caribou, that sort of thing. Okay, we're gonna pause there. Give my phone a break.